Welcome to Growing Up Beverly Hills. I'm Stacy.
And I'm David. We grew up together in Beverly Hills in the 1980s.
Forget what you've seen in the movies or TV shows. We have the real stories about real people growing up in Beverly Hills.
Here's a little known fact for you. There aren't any talking chihuahuas.
Beverly Hills folk drop a lot of names of people and places.
We just can't help it.
Don't worry, we'll explain it all at the end of the interview in the Beverly Hills Breakdown.
Enjoy, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There's only one place to get gourmet food with the best live music in town, and that's Vibrato Grill Jazz.
It's owned by our friend Eden Alpert and her father, the great Herb Alpert. They make you feel like a star amongst the stars.
You can now dine inside or out. There's live music Friday and Saturday nights, and they have an amazing Sunday brunch with live music too.
They have a full bar with imaginative cocktails, beer, and wine. They are located at the Glen Center at the top of Beverly Glen. You can make your reservations at resi.com or directly at vibratogrilljazz.com.
Tell them Growing Up Beverly Hills sent you.
We'll see you there at Vibrato Grill. Yay!
In this episode, we talked to the lovely, talented, and very funny Mindy Rickles.
Mindy started as an actor and moved into comedy just the way her famous father, the legendary Don Rickles, did. She grew up in Beverly Hills her whole childhood, but only spent the 11th and 12th grade at public school at Beverly Hills High.
She describes herself as painfully shy as a kid, but had no problem getting up in front of a big audience. We talk a lot about some shows that feature her or her dad, and in the Beverly Hills Breakdown at the end of the show, we'll tell you just where you can watch them all, and we do recommend you watch them all because they're great.
Let's hear Mindy.
Roll the tape, Stacy.
Mindy Rickles, welcome to Growing Up Beverly Hills. So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mindy, great to see you.
Great to see you too. Very exciting for me. For the two of you. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
So we wanted to start today, kind of get an idea of how your parents met and what brought you to Beverly Hills.
Well, actually, my parents met in Los Angeles. My mother came out from Philadelphia and my father came out from New York. And she was working as an assistant to my father's agent at, well, it was before it was William Morris. It was GAC, it was called. No, it wasn't called that. I can't remember. Maybe it was called that. I don't know. I can barely remember, my children's birth dates. So anyway, they met there and very quickly they got married. It was a little later in life because my dad was like 40 and my mother, or he was 39 and my mother was like 29.
Oh.
Yes, they got married and they moved to a building on Wilshire Boulevard. And then my mother became pregnant with me and they found a house in Beverly Hills and they moved there to Alpine Drive in Beverly Hills.
So you were born in Beverly Hills.
I was born in Beverly Hills and my God, it was exciting. I was born in Beverly Hills. Yes.
We love that.
But probably at Cedars Sinai.
Yes, or a hospital that's no Mount Sinai, somewhere I think that isn't there anymore. Yes.
I think it's the one we were all born at.
Right. They closed shop after me, I think.
Did you go to one of the elementary schools?
No, I didn't. I went to one of the private schools, John Thomas Dye.
Oh,
and that was a very elite private school, but when I went there, it was like, when do you want to start? Then it was,
right.
They let everyone in. Now it's very hard to get in and a kid has to be, he has to have like 5 pencils in his pocket and he has to be a scientist when he's 3. That was different then. So I went there 1st grade through 6th grade. And then from there, I went to Westlake, which was just called Westlake then. It wasn't called Harvard Westlake.
And that was an all-girls school at the time.
It was an all-girls school. We had uniforms, yes. And it was in like Holmby Hills.
Yep.
I went there from 7th grade to 10th grade. And it was very difficult, very rigorous. And by 10th grade, I was like, I'm not going to be a neurosurgeon. maybe I don't want to stay here and graduate. And I had a couple of friends that went to Beverly High. So I thought maybe I'll change and go to Beverly High. So I switched in my junior year. I only went to Beverly High for like 2 years.
Oh.
What was that experience like, coming in as a new kid in 11th grade?
Yeah, it was a little difficult. I was really, really shy. And, for the first 6 months, I was like just wearing like huge sweatpants and huge sweatshirts. I don't know why. And then I would just kind of drag myself across the lockers and just be by myself. And even though I did have a couple of friends there, and then one was a friend from Hillcrest Country Club, which was the, very elite country club at the time. And my parents belonged to it. And you would go there, for lunches and dinners during the Jewish holidays.
Right.
I remember seeing your dad and Bob Newhart dining there quite often as a kid.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
My grandmother was a big tennis player and a member at Hillcrest.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my family in general were not a hugely athletic group.
Yeah. But they could lunch.
Yes, food was a major thing. Not eating at home because my mother never cooked, but eating in restaurants and eating at Hillcrest was definitely, a very big thing. And actually the Newhart family, we were very close to them, and we, would spend all the holidays with them. So yeah, they would come to Hillcrest with us, or we would go to their home or in the Bel Air Country Club with them.
Right.
We grew up with their kids. And so, so I had friends from Hillcrest that went to Beverly High. And so that's how, I became friends. I was not good at making friends. So one of the only friends I made at Beverly High was your recent guest, Dr. Sophia Grant.
The best.
Yes. Who, she really knows how to tell a story.
That she does.
Yes. So she's a very close friend of mine, and she's one of the few friends that I've actually kept since we met in 11th grade.
That's great.
Yeah. And she was annoying, and I was annoying, and she was annoyed by me. And then that's how we became friends.
Instant friends, annoyed by each other.
Yes.
Going to a school early on that you kind of had to commute to, did you have friends just on your block and in the neighborhood that?
Oh, no. Where we lived on this hill, and there was nothing about, you go outside and there's your friends. We did have a friend of mine, Jody Hamilton, was up the street, who went to John Thomas Dye with me. And her mother was Carol Burnett. So I would go over to their house and whatnot. But other than that, no, I had no friends on the street. It was a very steep hill, and there was no way that you would have, friend. I didn't even know from that mentality of having friends on your block or something.
And would you still go into the town of Beverly Hills?
Oh, yeah, we would always. It wasn't far. That's, one of the few places we went. I guess we went to Brentwood some, but growing up, I didn't know much. We traveled, but I didn't know much of another world in LA, besides Beverly Hills. I went to the bookstore there, and sometimes Nate Now's, which was the deli, which I think is reopened or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did reopen. We heard it reopened. Yeah. And you would go shopping at Rudnick's. And
yes, and there was the shoe store,
Harry
Harris. I went there.
Yeah.
It was very exciting for me, for your older elderly viewers. I saw Tina Louise, not the Tina Louise of today, but the Tina Louise from Gilligan's Island there.
Yes.
With her daughter, who I remember had her name was like the name of a car. It was like Porsche or Chevrolet or something like that. So,
we just call her Buick.
Right. Exactly. So, and I was very excited to see her in the shoe store. I remember that.
I'd be excited by that.
Yeah, it was very exciting.
But would I be more excited to see Marianne? I don't know. That's the ongoing debate.
It's a tie. It's a toss-up.
So you come to high school late, and you get reintroduced to boys, but you also must have made some friends in the theater department because you do drama, right?
Yes, I was in the theater department. I think at one point I was in musical comedy in the drama department. The musical comedy thing was like a joke because I couldn't sing at all. And someone just threw me in there, and I don't know if I stayed or not, but I was in the drama department. And, the claim to fame for people is that I was in the drama department with David Schwimmer, a friend.
Yeah.
And I remember one day for his scene, because he thought he was, which he was, Al Pacino, and he just took a needle and with a hammer and hammered it into a board. And then we all stared at him, and then he went monologue. It was a little bit pretentious, might I say, but he obviously knew what he was doing, because
Clearly
I put a fork in a steak and went monologue, and it meant nothing. So he obviously, the thing with the hammer brought him to the fame and the acclaim that, he has today. And God bless him for that.
Yes.
Right. And so I was in a comedy play there. And I remember after the play, that was right when Sophia and I first met. She's like, I saw that play. And I was like, that's Mindy. She doesn't say 4 words. And then she saw me in the play, and I was screaming, and it was like a Neil Simon comedy thing. And she couldn't believe, it was the same person as that very shy person that would put herself in her locker and lock herself in. So.
Yeah, that's always one of my questions, just in general, to hear about from some of you actors or comedians or people that are on stage, that they're in real life painfully shy. And I don't know why a group of 100 people makes you feel comfortable instead of a smaller group, but I always wondered that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always sort of liked to perform, or when I was a kid, I would imitate my parents' friends all the time and, want to put on shows. But I was always kind of a little similar to my father, who was, famous comedian Don Rickles. And so I had that same, I was funny. He would say not as funny as him, but I was funny. So that was sort of my claim to fame, sort of in high school and that kind of thing.
Very cool. Very cool.
So what was it like growing up with your dad being Don Rickles?
Every day you must have been screaming with laughter. Absolutely not. My father, he loved us, and he was very into, his family, but when he wasn't working, he often just, sat in his big chair and watched sports on TV.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And if I came home, I remember one time I started therapy, and I came home and my dad said, "Did the doctor mention my name at all? What did he say about me?" So it really revolved around my dad mostly. Usually you grow up and it's about the kids. Joey, what did you do in school today? No, he was not.
No.
He would always say, "Come in and give me a kiss. I love you," but he was not, everything was really about him. And actually growing up, my mother wanted us all to stay together. So we would travel with him when he would go to Las Vegas to perform, or New York or Cleveland, or, one time I was like, how did I come to Rye, New York, or something like that?
Right.
Because he had worked there, So we went as much as we could with him, and we, in those days you could bring your work, and I would have maybe a tutor in Las Vegas or Reno or places like that. So we did that a lot, which was very different, from my friends. And I would take friends, to Las Vegas for the weekend. And Sophia said she never went because she was studying. So she missed out.
That could be.
Yeah, I mean, but who cares? She's a doctor, but she missed out on these exciting weekends in Vegas with me. Right. So that was
I would agree.
Her loss.
What was a weekend in Vegas like when you were a kid?
We would get picked up. I would get picked up from school in a limousine, and it's so ridiculous now. And then I would run down the lawn. There are the big lawn at Beverly High, and my dad would be screaming, "We're late, Mindy, Jesus," sorry for swearing, "Jesus, come on, let's go. And so I'd run down the hill. I wasn't athletic, so sometimes I'd roll down the hill.
We had a very big front lawn with rolling hills at the high school.
Rolling hills.
Yes. I would bring a friend, and we would get in this limo, and we would drive to the airport, and we get on a plane, and we go to Vegas. And if my dad was working, say, at the Sahara Hotel, which was a very famous hotel that isn't there anymore, we would probably stay in like a big suite unless we were staying in a house. Many times my mother wanted to stay not at the hotel, and each hotel sort of had a house, for the star to work in. But one I remember at the Riviera, it was like all pink, and there were like pink cherubs everywhere and a pink slide. It was very tacky, but we would stay there. And then at night, my dad probably did 2 shows a night. So like one at 8:00 and one maybe at 10:00. So we would go to the show, and my mother, possibly myself and my girlfriend, and we'd watch the show. And of course I, felt like very important because my dad was up there. And then at the end of the show, my dad would be like, I think my daughter's in the audience tonight. She's, lovely, and I want you all to see her. And she's going to be an actress or whatever. So he would like point to me in the audience, and the light would go on me, and I was very shy. So I would stand up and give, like a Meghan Markle wave or something, very princess-ish. And then after the show, my dad's manager, the maitre d', would come and get us and take us backstage. So on the way to backstage, everyone was like, "That's the daughter. That's the daughter."
Right.
And I was like, "That's me. That's right. That's me." So I felt, very like, "Oh, that feels great." And we went to the dressing room, which was always like very nice. I mean, I do stand up, and my dad would say to me, "What's your dressing room like?" And I'd be like, "It's an alley in the back, Dad."
Right.
He didn't understand.
Times have changed.
Right. But it was like a very luxurious dressing room with a bar and, a separate area for my dad. So usually we go in the dressing room, and my dad would be in the bathroom, showering, and he would put on this big robe. And then there would be all these people that were supposed to come backstage sort of lined up outside the door. And then as soon as my dad came out in the robe with his initials on it, he would sit down again in a big chair. It was always, he had to be in a big chair. So he'd sit down in a big chair, and these people from the audience would start coming in, and, they'd be introduced to my father and maybe take a picture with him, or they were very excited. And I had to just like smile and say hello, which was hard for me because that shyness thing came in then. After that, they would leave. And then possibly my father, my mother, and myself, and my dad had people that worked for him, like this one gentleman, Harry, who used to come on stage with him, but he was like his sort of valet. And so we would all go to dinner somewhere in the hotel. And then after we had dinner, my dad would go back and do a second show. And I would probably go up, stairs to bed with, So that was kind of what a night was like. And then he would sleep till very, like noon or something. And then I'd see him, and probably both my parents and my mother went back down around noon.
Wow. And did you grow up, was there a nanny with you? Like when you were young, like would you always have a nanny?
Let's see. When I was young, yes, I did have a nanny. One who was like from Switzerland, or she was German. I think my dad might have called her a Nazi, but
you think?
She was very domineering, and I think she got fired because she used to go to the pool and say she was Mrs. Rickles with me. So my mother found out. But another thing, I guess, with her when I was little, if I had a spot on my clothes, she used to immediately change them. So that's why my whole life I have this anxiety, this OCD thing about spots. If I see a spot, I have to leave. It's a very, I have to get out of there. So she gave me a lot of psychological problems that I deal with to this day. But what can you
Oh,
do? That's what a Nazi does. Yeah.
I would agree.
Right.
PTSD from the
Right.
Nazis.
Exactly. From my nanny. Right.
Speaking of psychological issues, do you think some of the shyness was actually from that spotlight being put on you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and then of course it's the whole thing of coming out of being under the shadow of your father, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very shy and you know, people, it wasn't necessarily about me. So yes, I definitely think, yeah, being in the spotlight from, you know, a young age and being always told to sort of smile and always look kind of, you know, happy,
Yeah.
you know, just as a kid, just because there were people watching, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you as a kid? Like, you know, were you in and out of school often? Like, would your mom and dad take you out of school and you go to Vegas for a couple of months, or was it just like a weekend thing?
No,
Or
there were times, well, in the summer, of course, I wasn't in school. We would be in Vegas for maybe 6 weeks or something.
right?
And my dad could be at one hotel, and then Bob Newhart might be across the street at another hotel.
So you had his kids and
Right.
you
To
could
hang
hang
out
out
with?
with them.
Yes, we hung out with them. I remember one time they were staying, maybe it was at the MGM, in this huge suite that was like the Elvis Presley suite, and that had an elevator in it, and you could see like there was a bullet hole in the elevator where Elvis like got pissed one night and shot his gun. So we
Wow.
loved seeing stuff like that. And we would go to Circus when that was like a real place to go to. I don't know what it's like now, but
A little trashy.
times have changed. But we would do that. But during the school year, no, probably no more than like, I don't know, 2 weeks tops. We wouldn't
Gotcha.
go, you know, for any longer than that.
Were there always a lot of celebrities around you growing up? Because I mean, Bob Newhart for sure.
Yeah.
But your dad seems to have such close friendships with so many of the new comedians, and then
And
of
the older
course,
ones.
Right.
and the Rat Pack, and
Right. I mean, he was, you know, he always said that Frank Sinatra, you know, gave him his start because he was working in clubs, you know, like with strippers and till 4 o'clock in the morning doing 4 shows a night. And Frank Sinatra came to see him and thought he was really funny. And of course, Frank Sinatra was the biggest star around. And then he would start coming to the shows with like Judy Garland and Cary Grant and, you know, all these very huge, Elizabeth Taylor. And so as he brought these people in and they saw my dad, that got him, you know, to another level. You know, he was friends with people like Buddy Hackett and, you know, a lot of other comedians of the day, but he was able to, you know, that really got him to like a higher echelon that really made his career. Definitely.
Beautiful to watch that, how close these guys were.
I mean, he was close. I mean, he worked with Frank Sinatra throughout his life. You know, he wasn't, of course, he knew Dean Martin and Sammy Davis, but he sort of came in at the tail end. You know, they were all a little bit older than him. But still, they liked him. Like they'd all go in the steam room, wherever at the hotel. And one time my dad said they locked him out, you know, so he couldn't get in. Like they would, you know, he was there, but he, like Joey Bishop was the comic that was much more, he was older. He was with them, but, you know, my dad did spend time with them also, but he was a little bit younger.
Very cool.
he seemed to get like maybe the most kicks out of entertaining those kind of guys.
Oh, yeah. He loved that. I mean, that was, you know, and he would make fun of them. He would say things to Frank Sinatra that nobody else could say. I mean, if someone else made that a joke, you know, they could be killed later that night.
Right.
So, and one true story, one night, Dean Martin, you know, after the show, Frank was like a very big drinker. And Dean Martin, who always was on stage with a drink, he actually wasn't a big drinker. And after the show, you know, he would get like, have a glass of milk and he wanted to get up early so he could play golf. And, you know, one night Frank was like, come on, we're going out, you're going to drink and all this. And he didn't want to go. Dean Martin was eating like a bowl of spaghetti or whatever. And Frank got so pissed, he picked up the bowl of spaghetti and just dumped it on top of Dean Martin's head. And of course, and of course, Dean Martin could do nothing because it's Frank and you don't go against him. Right. So
you don't mess with Frank.
No, not at all. So the fact that that Frank loved my dad, was a huge thing, because my dad could say whatever to Frank and he would always make fun of him.
It's pretty cool.
Would you see Frank around as a kid?
No. I mean, I saw him very briefly, as a teenager, maybe 19, when they did a show together in Vegas, and they maybe had a party in their suite afterwards or something like that. But he came to one or two of my dad's parties when I was older. He was supposed to come to my wedding, but then he was too sick and he actually died soon after. But no, I met him a few times, but he was not someone that, would come over to the house or anything. Yeah.
In your parents' personal life like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, they would have dinner at some point, but yeah, I didn't know him well.
Being at the house is different than socializing and knowing and, wow, very cool though.
Then it seems like all these young guys just really idolized and wanted to be around your dad, like a Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh yeah. My parents were very good friends with Jimmy Kimmel. And, they did a documentary on my dad and all these comics, not necessarily friends with them, but they all were like just Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock. And yes, they all talked about my dad as a legend that they admired, Robin Williams and all these people. And even like one of my dad's last shows, Steve Martin came and Martin Short or something. And my dad was always like, it was his first time on stage in terms of after the show, he said to me, about Steve Martin, was he laughing? And I was like, yes, Dad, he was laughing. Like, he hadn't been on stage before. He always wanted that, affirmation from the audience. Yeah. So wow. He loved that. Yeah. Being on stage.
I think that's true with everybody who performs. You need to hear it. Right. You need to hear that you did good or how did you do?
Exactly. Definitely. Yeah, he loved that, but he did great. He always, rarely was it not a good show. And if it wasn't a good show, he would say, I did this up in my room and I was laughing. He would say that this is a riot. I don't know what's wrong with you people, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And his type of comedy was so cool, just how he really insulted and attacked people without writing it out. And he just really did a lot of his work on the fly, which is incredible.
Yeah, he never wrote it out. I think he just started the insults with, guys at the bar at 4:00 in the morning that were heckling him. And, but it was always done in a way that people liked him. It wasn't done in a mean, vicious kind of way. Of course, his comedy now would have a definite problem because, when Mr. Potato Head, and he was the voice of Mr. Potato Head, recently became Potato, he would have been very devastated about that,
Right.
Potato Head is now them or something. He would have been upset about that because he was Mr. Potato Head. But, he did change his act somewhat because he worked until 4 years ago when he passed away. Yeah. And he still had his audience and, he did shows and they still filled up. And he was doing shows that were sort of Q&A. And his last shows, he did one with John Stamos and Regis Philbin. They did some shows. So, he did that towards the, end of his life when he couldn't like run back on stage, run back and forth on stage anymore. Yeah.
I was gonna say at the end, I love watching the Dinner with Don episodes. Oh, yeah. What a spectacular way to spend time and have these comedians and just get to know your dad a little. And he still zings them back. Yeah. It was just, I just went down a rabbit hole of like, oh my God, one was better than the next. It was amazing.
That was very exciting. He had one with like Snoop Dogg and even you could relate to him. And
even our own Johnny Silverman.
Yep. Johnny Silverman.
Yes, that's right. He did do one. And, I think Sarah Silverman did one.
Yep.
And just Tina Fey or just tons of people. Yeah.
It was great. It was really one of the most spectacular things. Did he come up with that? To be so relevant at 90, those are just really cool things that were always happening that your dad kept being relevant, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, it was. He always wanted to sort of, keep up with the times in terms of the fact that, he related to these very big comics of today. That was something, he felt really great about. And when that came up, he sort of talked about it with his manager, and they created that. And that's what, it was just a great thing for him to do. People loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Was he able to turn it off? I mean, I know, he could relax, but I'm thinking if somebody set me up for the perfect joke, I couldn't help to insult them.
Right. Yeah, he turned it off at home. He really wasn't that way. It wasn't like a show, or like I said, he could be quiet and wanting to relax a lot. He swam a lot, in the pool, and when he was younger, he played some tennis. But he really, at home, I mean, when he went out with his friends, they'd be laughing, and he might get up somewhere, or he always got up at parties, and everyone expected him to. And that was sort of the entertainment for the evening. He always knew that he'd be getting up and that kind of thing. So,
but if one of your friends was at home and just set him up for the perfect one-liner, could he resist?
He did that occasionally. But, they knew he was joking, although I'd be like, Dad, stop it. I'd be really embarrassed.
You must have been embarrassed. I would think that's embarrassing if he dissed a friend of yours, or.
Yes, it was embarrassing. And I would always be like, Dad, stop it. And he's like, okay, stop it. He was always just, he did do that.
And for a while, your dad had a sitcom, so that must have been a different life for you guys. He must have stayed home. And
yes, he had a couple of sitcoms in the 70s. He did this one, CPO Sharky, and that went for I don't know, 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think 2 seasons.
2 seasons. And then later on, he did this Daddy Dearest with Richard Lewis. And I actually, had a little part on that, playing a nurse. And that actually turned out to be a very stressful week, with my dad. And he was like, it was just interesting because I'd never done, something with him before. But he was worried about himself and remembering his lines and that kind of thing. Uh-huh.
Was home life a lot different when he was home and he was doing the show?
Certainly it was better when he was home. I mean, my parents, they took us on many vacation trips, which was great. But sometimes they would go with the Newharts on these cruises or something, and they'd be gone for 10 days or 12 days. And that was I did not like that at all. So I liked it definitely, when both my parents were home and my dad was home. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, it's so amazing how your dad was a trained actor, first from the, American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And so how did he even get into comedy from being a trained actor?
Well, he actually, he trained at the American Academy in New York. And he said, he would go to classes, and then he would see Grace Kelly would come out of a limousine with gloves to her elbows for class. He did that initially. And then, he just started, it was almost like he got some parts, he did this movie, Kelly's Heroes.
He's great in that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And, he did this Odd Couple on stage with Ernest Borgnine, but I guess, and then he ended up being on every sitcom like Gilligan's Island and, all of those shows. But I think the comedy, he's just started, he was very funny naturally. So he just started, and he insulted, when he was in World War II, all the guys on the ship would be laughing at him. So it was just a natural sort of progression, and he would do stand up and do these different TV shows. But then when the stand up, with Frank Sinatra, got to be so huge, it wasn't millions of, directors were we must have Don Rickles in this, so that became so big, and he went to Vegas, and that just became such a big thing for him that was more of a focus, Bob Newhart also was very big in Vegas, and then he also had a huge television career, which was amazing. But for my dad, it was more being a comic became, more. He tried to do films here and there. And he did Casino, which was where I don't know if he spoke in it, but he was great, And then, so he did things like that, and he did films, when he had the chance. And so it was sort of a combination, but stand-up would be, the major thing that he did. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And then how'd you get interested in it?
I was always funny like my dad. And I would get up at all of his birthday party, actually his 89th birthday party, which was the last big party he had, which was, about 5 years ago. My mother said, my husband plays trumpet on the side and he has a jazz band. And she said, I'm going to have Ed, my husband, and his band play. And then you're going to get up and do 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I had gotten up at like a lot of their parties for my dad's, I don't know, 70th or something. And that's when he did Casino. So he invited Sharon Stone and Martin Scorsese. And I did get up, probably no one asked me to, but I just did. And
how could you do that being shy?
What did you say? I'm going to take the mic and go?
Yeah, yes, that's what I did. Larry King was talking like too long. At one point I was like, that's enough from you, Larry. And I grabbed the mic and I took it away, and everyone laughed. And then I got up and I did this whole thing, and made fun of Sharon Stone. And yeah, I did this whole thing.
Love it.
And then, but at his 89th, I really wrote down just like 1 or 2, 3 words on an index card. And then I did 20 minutes. And I will say they were screaming. And it was people.
I love that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like Aunt Selma, it was like John McEnroe was there and Bob Saget and all these, stars or whatever. So whenever I would do that, it was great. And I actually, it sounds like a joke, but I performed at my dad's memorial where my mother's like, get up.
Do tell.
Right. And I did a tight, 30. No, I
did a tight 30.
Right. I got up and I talked about my dad and, again, there was like Judd Apatow and all, and I wasn't I'm able to do that, which is odd to me I'm not as shy, of course, as I was when I was young, but that's something that is very easy for me for some reason, just off the top of my head to do stuff like that. So,
and are you like your dad? Like you don't write down a lot of material, or do you kind of go on the fly as well, or do you do both? Or?
No, I have to write material. There have been times when I started stand up in the beginning where I was just like improving and talking to the audience. And, you can't really do that. I learned as your act. You really have to have a set act that you're doing. Even my dad, he listened to his act, on a recording. He listened to himself over and over. So he knew his act. And then he might throw in something if he was seeing someone in the audience. But he always knew, when he kissed some woman's hand, he would say, what'd you have for dinner? Fish? He always knew he was going to say that. But he may say other things, So, no, you really have to, I learned, you really have to have an act that you really know like the back of your hand. And then if you want to throw in something here or there, you can, but you have to know where you are. It's like chunks of the act. Yeah.
Do you do it because you really love the, the feeling of making the audience laugh?
Yeah. My dad was very discouraging, of me doing it. He was always like, you're going to be an actress. And, I was an actress and did, some parts in my 20s, nothing major. But I did, like this In the Heat of the Night, I was like a guest star in that. But, when I auditioned for the part of, what's her name? I don't know, the Jennifer Aniston's part on Friends.
Yeah.
I didn't get that, so it wasn't like I had this huge career or anything. But then I always wanted, I always was funny, and everyone I ever met was like, you should do stand up. That was like, I heard that constantly. So but my dad thought it, he's like, why do you want to do that? It's a very tough life. And then when I was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, Jeff Garlin, the comic, I met him through my older son's school. And he was like, you should do stand up. I'll introduce you, I'll get you in at the Laugh Factory and all this. So I was like, okay, I was much older, but I thought, if I'm ever going to do it, I'll do it now. And so I did it then. And, I loved, yes, when the audience laughs. And probably for a year, they were laughing. And then kept saying, you're going to bomb because everyone does. And I'm like, well, I'm not, And then after a year, suddenly, yes, it became, ups and downs and all of that. I did do, which, unfortunately, of course, my dad, well, I wouldn't have done it if he were alive, but Jeff Ross called me up and asked me to play my dad on a Netflix special, which I couldn't believe, I was going to do that. And it was different episodes where they would roast famous people that weren't alive. So that the one I was in, actually, it was sort of like they were roasting Hitler.
Yeah.
Gilbert Gottfried played Hitler. And then they had an actress, Rachel Feinstein, that played Anne Frank. John Lovitz was in it. He played like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And they put a bald head on me and put me in a uniform, like from a sailor's uniform that my dad would have worn in CPO Sharkey. And I got up and imitated my dad and insulted all of them. And that actually was very easy for me. I mean, I had a script, which was a lot of what my dad would say in his act. But that, I could do that because I could always, do my dad's whole show or imitate him. And so I was surprised, he asked me to do that. But it was great. That was like one of the best times,
Yeah, it was fun. We saw that watching you. And
So it must be tempting to go into that, to try to insult. I mean, you certainly can handle a heckler. And does that come up in your act where you do some insults?
I mean, it has come up. I feel very comfortable usually talking to the audience. And I can sort of relate, did you meet this guy, and I could say, what's your name, Joe, and this is Jim. Have you two met, and I can very much get into like an improv thing. So that's sort of easy. I mean, I haven't had many hecklers per se, but I've definitely had experiences where I have gone to the audience and whoever I'm with or talking is like not into it and I have to move on, very quickly.
Yeah.
But, I've done that. I'm more comfortable with than even like set bits that I'm doing sometimes.
Yeah.
Who are some of the other comedians that you admire?
One comedian I admire who doesn't really work that much. Well, I don't see her around that much. Who I loved growing up is Sandra Bernhard.
Yeah.
And I used to go to New York and I'd go with my mother like to her shows and they were very interesting. But I always loved her. And Jerry Seinfeld, I've always thought was really funny. And Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And Judy Gold, I thought was a very funny comic. So, there's so many comics today and a bunch of them were in Jeff Ross's show, like Nikki Glazer and, people like that, very like hot comics of today. So Fortune Fimster, these are like big comics now. So it was great to meet them and see people like that because there's so many more, female comics today. And sometimes, I'll drive down Sunset and there'll be a billboard of some girl or young woman who I've absolutely never heard of. And, it's her HBO special or her Netflix special. And I'm like, who is that? I have no idea, but they, have all these specials and that kind of thing.
So when you were starting out, did you hit the road and go all across the country to big and small places?
I mean, I did go to different places, but I wouldn't say I was never on the road, I might go to Vegas for a week or, at the Tropicana or the MGM or something, or I'd go to Milwaukee, great town.
That sounds fun.
And then, And then, places, Florida, but never like on the road per se.
Yeah, when you have kids, and they must have been younger at that time.
They were young when I started doing that. And we were living in, also when I did shows here in Malibu at the time. So it was a very long drive to get to like, Hollywood, West Hollywood, to the clubs and stuff. And as I got older and as they got older, now they're like, one's in college and both are in college, but one's at home. So I had a lot more time in the past, except for COVID, in the past couple of years. And I was doing a show at the Laugh Factory called Monday, Mindy. And I would have like a big comic that I would interview first. I had like Paul Reiser or different people, Jeff Garlin or Jeff Ross, or whatever. And I would interview them. And then the audience would have some questions. And then there would be like 4 other pretty big comics that would come up, and do stand-up. So I was doing that a lot. And that became like a thing I was doing right before COVID started, because that got a lot of audience response. And
that sounds fun.
Yeah, very cool.
Are your kids interested in comedy at all? Do they have the bug?
No. I mean, they're both funny, actually. My older son is very funny in a very dry way. But at one point he was going to go to like an open mic thing, but he had no interest in it. He wants to be like a teacher, he's a history major and but they're both funny. Definitely.
But not in the business.
No, they don't want to do that. Yeah. So
very good.
My father would always say, even though I was in the mix, if one of my kids were funny, he'd say, "Oh, and who did you get that from?" And I'm like, where was I at? How did I just completely get out of the whole mix?
So your whole life was the world of Don Rickles, I guess.
Pretty much. I mean, I had things going on, but it was, yes, he was, as opposed to families where it's like, they're very focused on the kids. It was very much, my dad. Yeah.
And what was your mom like? Was she balancing that? And
I'm sorry, who, my mom? My mom.
Your mom.
She was very organized and really handled everything from my dad. He really, just went on the stage. My mother organized the traveling and the home life and the meals and absolutely everything. I mean, she was like completely the most organized person I've ever seen. And I'm the opposite, unfortunately. And so, yes, she's the one that handled everything. She's the one that decided, we're all going to go on these trips to keep the family together, because usually, comics, whatever, they go on the road for months and then, oftentimes they get divorced and all this. So she wanted to always, keep us together as much as she could.
Sounds like they were a great team.
That's a pretty unusual thing for somebody who grew up in Beverly Hills, to have your parents be married forever.
Yes, they were married for 50 years. And
amazing.
So, and the Newharts also, their best friends, have been married for, I don't know, maybe a little more than my parents. It's just.
Do you know any secrets?
No, it's funny because I did not marry anyone. Well, my husband is probably a little bit like my mother, because in our home, even though I'm not a star, it's all about Mindy, So my husband has done, he's like, he handles a lot, most everything, he would say. And I love that. I don't want to handle anything. So I'm very much like my dad that way. I just want to be funny, even if it's to the wall, I don't, that kind of thing. But yes, he is similar to my mother and I'm similar to my dad. I didn't, like most women, I want to marry someone just like my father. I did not do that at all. Because then we would be fighting for the attention. And that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Because you have an outgoing personality in that, in that way.
Right.
And
it would be too much.
Similar, yet way too much. It would be an explosion.
Exactly. Exactly. So it works out really well because we've been married, 24 years. And
oh, nice.
Yeah. So it does work out. it balances
It's
itself.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I think you must have learned some of that from your parents and the Newharts.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I looked at their marriage. I wasn't like most common. I was friends with one of Dean Martin's daughters. He had so many kids, and it was like her mother was one of his wives. And I remember at Westlake, and she would see him on Sunday. He would take her to Chasen's for dinner, which was an old, very famous restaurant, and buy her very expensive clothes, but she wouldn't see him at all during the week. It was sort of like on the weekend, he gave her a ton of cash and took her to a fancy restaurant. And she had all this money that, we didn't have. She was wearing like a Rolex when we were 15 and that kind of thing.
Right.
But, and nowadays that's very common, but, all these kids that didn't see their parents, they were divorced so I was very happy, or actually took it for granted, that my parents didn't divorce and the Newharts were together. But I'm sure I saw that and wanted, that kind of a marriage. Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it's the opposite. David and I, our parents are divorced. So, you try to do it differently, So, the role models are different, and it's good to take what you got from that. Amazing.
Exactly.
From that.
Yeah. So that was good. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
I really want to ask you about this because I find it so bizarre, but your dad had some kind of close friendship with Johnny Depp.
Oh, yes, he was. Well, there were a lot of people that loved my dad that were like these young stars, and I'd be shocked, like Johnny Depp. I don't know. He met him once and he was like, I live for you, John Mayer.
That seems like the weirdest combination.
I know.
Johnny Depp and your dad.
I know.
Yeah.
It was like the pirate and, the guy in the bar hall, serving the drinks. But he, and like when he met John Mayer, John Mayer got down on his knees.
It just doesn't even seem his kind of thing. Like John Mayer, that's his kind of comedy.
John Mayer thought he was hysterical, and he was invited to parties. And also Jamie Dornan from 50 Shades of Grey. It turned out, my dad found out that he loved my dad so much, which is like crazy, that he said he had a picture of him over his bathtub, which I thought made him odd. I said, wow, he's an odd guy, But my dad loved hearing that, and would have probably gotten together with him. No, he loved it when people like that, love my dad. And even not necessarily someone younger, but one time he was on, I don't know, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel or something. I don't know if it was Johnny Carson. And he never would accept like the second spot. He always took the first spot. And this one time they were like, Denzel Washington is coming on and he has a new movie to promote. And would you accept the second spot just this one time? And so he said, okay, because it was Denzel. And Denzel came out and talked about the movie, and my dad, they didn't know each other. And then my dad came out, and Denzel got up and sat in the other chair, the second spot next to my dad. He's like, no, I'm staying, in front of the audience. He's like, I want to stay for this. And my dad, that put him on a huge role. And Denzel was hysterically laughing like he was crying. And that was like, my dad lived for that, the fact that Denzel Washington, this huge star who he absolutely didn't know, and he thought he's a serious guy. And when he said, I'm staying, he got in the other chair. It was like, that just got my dad going. And he would be like, where's he going with his career? Stuff like that. And he just got on a roll. And that was like an amazing show. So, yeah.
Fabulous. It seems like a lot of fabulous things happen when your dad just kind of popped up too, just magically, like,
yes,
you never knew.
Right. Exactly. You always knew, something was going to happen, but, people that were very serious, actors or whatever, if we were in a restaurant and they were sitting at a table and my dad were walking in and we're going to pass that table, he's definitely going to say something to that guy. He's definitely going to say, like, at one time, Larry Ellison, the billionaire, was in a restaurant. My dad didn't know him, and he walked by and he was like, you need some cash, whatever he said. It was just, he always had to say something. And 99% of the time, they would get hysterically laughing and say, oh my God, I love you and all this. So yeah, that always happened all the time.
Do you think nowadays, like, could a comic be like that now? Or, I mean, because he was saying names up until 2006 and 7 that were just like, I can't even say it on the show right now.
I mean, he never said, he said things that were not politically correct at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he was doing that, like I said, right up until he passed away, which would have been 4 years ago. I don't know if he could change things. I mean, I still think he had such a big audience. And even at 91, it was shocking.
Yeah.
And not just older people, young people. I don't know if he modified, certain times my mother would say to him, you cannot say that, and he would take it out or whatever. So I think he could have modified things. He had such a big act and he had so much, material and things that he just knew that hopefully I would like to think he would have been able to, modify it because he loved, working and that kind of thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Certainly some of it, some of kind of what we might find offensive today, I think, pointed out at a time like, hey, this exists. Like there's racism in the world. And I didn't feel like he was being racist. I felt like he was bringing attention to it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't, and people that maybe never saw him thought he said, terrible things or the N word or, I mean, he never.
No, nothing like that.
He just, I mean, it was another time when he grew up and that kind of thing. But I think, no, he always, he was successful because he was never mean-spirited. And he always, he sang at the end, he sang songs about, it was just, he's a nice guy. And it's just, to make the audience laugh. And obviously, these audiences knew it because if he were just mean or, something like that, it wouldn't go over. So, but yeah, I think he would have, I mean, he certainly wasn't like in a little world. He saw everything going on in the world. And so I think he could have modified things and still had his audience.
I mean, he was funny.
Yeah.
Funny. Right, I think he could have joked about anything.
Right, exactly. That's true.
I worry that, we censor it too much and then you just are like, well, these problems don't exist. Like racism doesn't exist.
Yeah.
If we can't have comedians joking about it. And certainly like a Richard Pryor and other comedians would talk about race and bring attention to it.
Yes.
For sure.
I think now, even they have to be so careful. And I have to, I'm doing stand-up now. It's a whole different thing. And I will have to be careful. You can't say so many things now and everything. Sometimes I think it gets too extreme that everything you say is, not politically correct or something like that. And I think it sometimes gets to an extreme level that gets silly,
Exactly.
You cannot say, oh, I didn't like her hair color. Well, that was bullying, So it's just, I think it gets a little bit ridiculous. This Crystalia, who wasn't very famous, but he, worked and everything, he had a whole thing with women underage that said he had sexually abused them and all this. And like his agent, then you heard the agent drop them and the management company and this new movie he was going to do. They've now, put someone else in his part, so it's like their whole career is kind of ruined, at least for now. They're online doing like their podcasts, but they don't have the career that they had before at all. They have to sort of reinvent themselves or something. I don't know.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about a cruise ship where you just have these canceled people.
Oh, right. Yes, exactly. They just do what they want and throw them
at sea.
Yeah.
Throw them overboard.
That's a normal occurrence now. So, In another
Exactly.
life, I wanted to be like a forensic pathologist, but that didn't happen. So
Ooh.
I'm very into crime, and that's
Crime and all that.
that's your next show. Yeah.
Well, that's
I like
the most
that.
popular kind of podcast are these
Oh, I know.
These crime ones.
podcasts.
Yes. Yeah, they're fascinating. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
We're
that's
all-
my other idea, is to do a parody crime podcast. Maybe that's
a
project for you.
Yeah, that's something actually at one point we sort of did a demo for that. Like, that's so funny, like a podcast. It was a crime. Well, it was a famous crime, and they did a movie called The Staircase, which was a documentary on it about this man whose wife fell down the stairs and she died. And then they said he murdered her because also 10 years before he lived in Germany and this other woman fell down the stairs when he was there. So a lot of women falling downstairs with this guy around, so it was suspicious. Yeah. So the idea was like to do one of those episodes, but kind of, because it was long before make fun of it. But I mean, even like during the Menendez trial, which of course so many people today don't even know what that is, but the brothers that killed their parents, I mean, the house was like, 10 blocks away, and I used to drive by it all the time and stare at it. And I actually I sat behind O.J. Simpson one day during his trial.
Way.
Yeah, so that was like thrilling. Yeah, I had a boyfriend. I worked at Neiman Marcus at one point when I was, doing the acting thing. And I met this guy who was doing security there. And he became a deputy sheriff. This is when I was like in my 20s, and I was dating him. So it was during the OJ trial. So he got me into the trial, and I sat behind OJ. And you would have thought I was at the Academy Awards. I mean, I was like thrilled by everything that was going on. I couldn't even believe I was there. Dominic Dunn, the famous writer, was there. Like, I spoke to him. He went to every day. Yeah, it was like I was with Brad Pitt. I was so thrilled by the whole thing. You couldn't even imagine. Yeah.
Mindy, that is super cool.
Right, isn't it? Yeah. So I like to brag about stuff like that, except normally they're like, when I say the Menendez, they're like, who's that?
Well, we'd actually like to get them on the show.
Oh my God. That would be great.
A jailhouse podcast.
Yeah. It just I forgot that, of course, they went to Beverly and all of that. Yeah.
Growing up Beverly Hills, we can have them on the they qualify.
Oh, absolutely. That's so funny. Yes, definitely.
Well, you have that OJ story, but I like to ask everybody what was one really over-the-top experience that you had in your life that could have only have happened from growing up in Beverly Hills?
It could have only happened from growing up in Beverly Hills. Oh, God. Well, let's say that my father having, wanting to live in Beverly Hills and then having me, I don't think, like his Netflix thing. The Netflix thing that I did was like one of the greatest things I did. And I don't think, had I not had my Beverly Hills upbringing, with my parents and just the whole life I had that led me, to that point. I mean, I've certainly had a very privileged, life. And I think I learned a lot as I've grown up and as an adult that, there are all these different people and all these different lives, and you have to just kind of, learn from each experience. And when people say, oh, Beverly Hills, oh, that must have been, they have an image of it, but it really was, it wasn't like every other place, but it was people, were friends and there was closeness, and there were places in the community like a deli that everyone loved to go to. Like in your hometown, there'd be some kind of place to go. There are similarities. So it's not like it's just this crazy world. I mean, it is, but certain things that ground you are the same, in so many different places. So
sure,
I think I learned from that, definitely.
Our small town upbringing.
Right, exactly, right.
Well, this has been so much fun.
Oh, me too. I need to come back for the Menendez episode.
Yes. Well, we might need you.
We'd love to have you back for that.
I did get a tour of a supermax jail when I was dating this guy, and the inmates have
Really?
to walk on one side and I was on the other. And again, it was like I was from Omaha and I was on a tour of Universal Studios. It was thrilling for me, even though I could have been
I
killed at
love
any
it.
moment. Yeah, it was thrilling. So, yeah.
I love that you love that part of the world. The dark underbelly.
It's like, that's my middle name, Underbelly. I love that.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yes.
It's fabulous.
Well, Mindy, we can't thank you enough. It's been so great chatting with you.
You too.
Mindy, it was
Thank
so
you.
awesome seeing you, chatting with you, catching
Thank
up with
you.
you, hearing all about your awesome life and what it's been like growing up Beverly Hills for you. And again, thank you and thank you and thank you.
Thank you. It was really fun. I had a great time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mindy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Beverly Hills Breakdown.
Woohoo! It's the breakdown. Let's do it, David. What do you got today?
Mindy was a lot of fun to talk to, and both her and her dad have appeared in a lot of TV shows and specials, and they're really all worth watching. So I thought we'd give you the guide to how to watch them all.
Perfect.
The first one, Mindy talked about being in a roast of Anne Frank, which was really kind of a roast of Hitler. And that show is called Historical Roasts on Netflix.
That was really funny. And Mindy did a great job. She played her dad, Don Rickles, and they totally roasted Hitler and Anne Frank. And it was really fun to watch.
Yeah, that was cool. And she really describes it as very special in her life, which is touching.
Yeah, totally. I would think it would be very touching to have the opportunity to play your own father or your own parent. Very, very cool.
Another one was Dinners with Don, and you can watch those short segments on YouTube.
Dinners with Don was so great. I watched them, and I actually fell in love with them. They're just short vignettes where Don literally is at dinner at like Dan Tana's and a cool comedian comes in, a young one, Snoop Dogg or Amy Poehler or Paul Rudd, and they just sit down at dinner with Don and chat with him. And Don just keeps zinging him back and telling him the scoop. And it was just really awesome. And they were just wonderful, wonderful shows. I hope everyone checks them out on YouTube. Dinners with Don.
A great tribute to Don Rickles is Don Rickles One Night Only, an all-star comedy tribute. I don't know where you can officially see this one, but I watched it on YouTube.
It was a really fun show.
Yeah, a huge number of comedians got up and just kind of did a little comedy, and Jerry Seinfeld hosted it, and it featured Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, and then his weird friend Johnny Depp.
The pirate. We had to get down to the bottom of the pirate.
And it's not like he just dresses like a pirate for these movies. Every time I've seen him in real life, it's almost like he's wearing the same exact costume, just out on the town. He's dressed no differently.
Kind of funny, right? I guess if you're getting paid that kind of money from Disney, you might as well just live in the dream.
You think he'd kind of tone it down and not want to be recognized, but oh no, he's in full pirate regalia. I've seen him out at concerts and, hey, there's that pirate.
Kind of funny. I kind of liked him with the 21 Backstreet or 21 Jump Street kind of look.
Yeah, you think he'd get recognized less that way.
Exactly.
On Amazon Prime, you can watch Mr. Warmth, the Don Rickles project.
What an incredible project. This was done, really, Mindy's brother was an executive producer on the show. It was a family-run show. He won an award for the show. What a wonderful, wonderful show. Just really is Don Rickles all day. It's one of his last shows that he does in 2006, and all these young comedians and other comedians talk about him, and it was just a beautifully well-done show called Mr. Warmth. And he was warm.
Well, he was so well admired, and everybody did love him.
As we did more investigative work on the show, I truly fell in love with Don Rickles. I knew he was funny, but now I really, love him so much. And also, don't forget, he's Mr. Potato Head on all of the Toy Story movies.
Yes.
It was awesome, Mindy. It was great hearing from you and hearing your story. We loved having you on as a guest, and it was just a complete joy for David and I, and we thank you.
Yeah, we can't wait to hear more of your own comedy.
Yeah, we'll come out and see you when you go back to the Laugh Factory.
Well, that's it for the breakdown. Remember to like us, love us, subscribe, talk to us on Instagram and Facebook.
You know where to find us, everywhere podcasts are available. Tell all your friends and keep our love going. Thanks for joining us. Thanks.
Talk to you next time.
So suicide has personally affected my life, and we like to mention at the end of our show that there is help for everybody out there.
You know, I think everybody's going through a tough time now, and we don't want anybody to take their lives.
Especially during this COVID situation, we've all been experiencing depression and hard times.
Things can always get better. Everything bad now can get better.
Everything can get better, and there is a lot of help out there. So please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. There is always help.
It doesn't hurt to call, so do that.
You don't have to do this alone. There's always help.